The auction block stood like a gallows in the blazing summer heat. Sweat trickled down Isaiah Freeman's back as he stood among 24 other enslaved people. His stump of a left arm, ending just below the elbow, was exposed deliberately by the auctioneer's assistant, who had ripped his sleeve earlier that morning. "This one here," the auctioneer bellowed, pointing at Isaiah. 38 years, healthy despite the deficiency. Previous owner claims he's good with tools, but I reckon that's hard to believe. A ripple of laughter spread through the crowd of potential buyers. Isaiah kept his gaze fixed on the distant church spire beyond the square. 8 years had passed since the cotton gin had taken his hand, and 6 months since his previous master had died, forcing the sale of the plantation's human property. Unlike the others, Isaiah possessed something they couldn't see, knowledge that made him more valuable than anyone suspected. The bidding started low. $5 for the cripple, a voice called from the back. $7, another voice countered. Isaiah's chest tightened. Low bids meant a desperate buyer, usually a small farm with brutal conditions, or worse, the sugar plantations of Louisiana, where men rarely survived more than a few years. $20, a new voice announced. The crowd parted slightly to reveal a tall man in an immaculate white suit. William Blackwood, owner of Magnolia Hill, one of the largest plantations in the region. His cold eyes assessed Isaiah like a man examining a broken tool. $20 going once. The auctioneer looked around. Twice. Sold to Mr. Blackwood. As Isaiah was led away, chains rattling around his ankles, he caught fragments of Blackwood's conversation with his companion. "William, you've lost your mind. What use is a one-handed slave to you? Pennington's breaking down equipment faster than we can repair it. This one supposedly knows machines. If he's lying, I'll just sell him downriver. If not..." Blackwood's voice trailed off. The overseer, a stocky man named Holt, shoved Isaiah toward a wagon where 3 other newly purchased slaves waited. One was a young woman clutching a small child to her chest, tears silently tracking down her face. The other was an older man whose scarred back told its own story. "Move," Holt ordered, striking Isaiah with a riding crop. Magnolia Hill rose from the landscape like a monument to southern prosperity. The main house stood 3 stories tall, with white columns and broad verandas overlooking manicured gardens. Behind this facade of elegance stretched 800 acres of cotton fields, and most importantly to Blackwood, a newly constructed cotton gin house with equipment imported from England at enormous expense. When the wagon rolled to a stop near the slave quarters, Holt pulled Isaiah aside. "Master Blackwood wants you at the gin house, now." Isaiah was led past rows of cabins, where exhausted field hands watched with hollow eyes. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the plantation grounds. In the distance, someone was singing a sorrowful spiritual that seemed to hang in the humid air. The gin house was a large structure with high ceilings and massive windows to capture the breeze. Inside stood the most advanced cotton processing machinery money could buy, and it was completely still. A thin, nervous-looking white man paced between the silent machines. "This is him. This is your solution," he asked when he saw Isaiah. "Pennington, meet your new assistant," Holt said with a smirk. "Master Blackwood says he knows machines." Pennington circled Isaiah, stopping to stare at his missing hand. "What exactly am I supposed to do with a one-handed mechanic?" "I can fix it," Isaiah said quietly, his eyes already examining the main drive shaft. "He speaks," Pennington mocked. "Please enlighten us then. What's wrong with it?" Isaiah moved carefully toward the main engine. "Your timing belt is slipping because the tension pulley is misaligned. The drive shaft bearing is also going to fail soon. Listen to that knock when you turn it manually." Pennington's face reddened. "Impossible. You haven't even seen it running." "Don't need to," Isaiah replied, keeping his voice neutral despite the dangerous territory he was entering. Appearing too knowledgeable could be as hazardous as appearing useless. I worked on one similar at the Wilkinson Plantation. I can hear what's wrong. Fine, Pennington snapped. Fix it then. You have until morning, or I'll tell Master Blackwood you're worthless. After Pennington and Holt left, Isaiah stood alone in the cavernous space. In the fading light, he examined the machine that would determine his fate. Working slowly with his one hand, he began disassembling the main drive components. Hours passed. Isaiah's fingers were slick with grease and blood from where the sharp metal had caught his skin. But by dawn, he had realigned the tension system and reinforced the bearing. As the first rays of sunlight filtered through the high windows, he tightened the final bolt. Voices approached from outside. Blackwood himself entered with Pennington and Holt trailing behind. "Well?" Blackwood demanded. Isaiah wiped his hand on his tattered trousers. "It's ready, sir." Pennington snorted in disbelief and moved to the control lever. The machinery groaned, then roared to life. The once stuttering clatter was now a smooth, powerful rhythm. Blackwood's eyebrows rose slightly, the closest thing to approval Isaiah had seen from him. "How long will it last?" "The bearing will need replacing within 3 months, but I can maintain it until then," Isaiah replied. "With proper care, the rest should last years." Blackwood studied him for a long moment. "Pennington, get him whatever tools he needs. Holt, find him somewhere to sleep in here. I want him available day and night." As they left, Pennington lingered behind. "Don't get comfortable," he hissed. "The moment those machines falter, you'll be back on the auction block." Isaiah said nothing, but as he looked around at the gleaming machinery, a calculated thought formed. His value had just increased dramatically, and with it, a dangerous sliver of possibility. Knowledge was power, even for a slave, and power, carefully applied, might someday mean freedom. That night, Isaiah was shown to a small storage room at the back of the gin house. It contained nothing but a thin pallet on the floor and a battered trunk for his non-existent possessions. After the door was locked from the outside, Isaiah lay in the darkness, listening to the night sounds of the plantation. From somewhere in the slave quarters, he could hear singing again. Low, mournful voices sharing coded messages of hope and resistance. Isaiah closed his eyes, remembering the faces of the other slaves he'd seen upon arrival. The young mother, the scarred old man. Everyone here had a story, a life interrupted by cruelty. Sleep wouldn't come. Instead, Isaiah rose and moved to the small window. Through the bars, he could see the main house illuminated by gas lamps, while the slave quarters lay in darkness. 2 worlds existing side by side, one built upon the suffering of the other. He flexed his remaining hand, feeling the new calluses forming from today's work. If Blackwood valued his skills enough, perhaps he could negotiate for better conditions, not just for himself, but for others. It was a dangerous line of thinking, but Isaiah had nothing left to lose. As dawn approached, he finally drifted to sleep with the rough outline of a plan forming in his mind. 3 months had passed since Isaiah's arrival at Magnolia Hill. The gin house had never operated more efficiently, processing more cotton with fewer breakdowns than ever before. Isaiah's reputation had spread throughout the plantation. The one-handed miracle worker who could fix anything from broken machinery to leaking roofs. Blackwood had begun sending for him whenever anything mechanical failed on the plantation. Each repair further cemented Isaiah's value and granted him limited movement around Magnolia Hill. Though still a slave, his skilled hands had earned him marginally better treatment than the field hands who toiled from sunup to sundown. On a sweltering afternoon, Isaiah was repairing a broken water pump near the slave quarters when he noticed the young woman from the auction. She was hanging laundry with one hand while balancing her child on her hip with the other. "Let me help with that pump," he offered, approaching carefully. Field hands were often suspicious of those with special positions. The woman regarded him warily. "You're the machine man." "Isaiah," he replied, kneeling beside the pump. "And you are?" "Sarah," she answered after a pause. "This is my son, Thomas." The child, no more than 3 years old, stared at Isaiah's stump with unabashed curiosity. "What happened to your arm?" Sarah asked, then immediately looked down. "I'm sorry. That's not my business." "Cotton gin," Isaiah replied simply, working on the pump. 8 years ago. Caught it in the gears while I was trying to clear a jam." With a few quick adjustments, water began flowing from the pump again. "There, should work fine now." Sarah filled her bucket. "Thank you. The women were hauling water from the creek all morning." "I could teach you how to fix it," Isaiah said quietly, "for next time." Sarah's eyes widened in alarm. "They don't allow us to know things?" Isaiah finished. "That's why they don't suspect when we do." He glanced around to ensure they weren't being watched. "Knowledge they don't think we have is the only advantage we get." Sarah studied him for a long moment. "You're dangerous, Isaiah." "Just trying to survive," he replied. "Same as you." Later that evening, as Isaiah returned to the gin house, Holt intercepted him. "Master Blackwood wants you at the main house," the overseer said, his perpetual scowl deepening. "Seems the new-fangled indoor plumbing is giving them trouble." Isaiah followed Holt up the sweeping driveway to the main house. It was rare for slaves other than house servants to enter the main residence, and Isaiah felt the weight of unseen eyes as he climbed the steps to the front entrance. The interior was a showcase of wealth. Crystal chandeliers, imported furniture and paintings in gilded frames. Isaiah kept his gaze lowered as Holt led him through the grand foyer to a bathroom where water was leaking through the ceiling. "Fix it," Holt ordered, "and don't touch anything you don't have to." Left alone, Isaiah quickly identified the problem, a loose connection in one of the copper pipes. As he worked, he overheard voices from an adjacent room. One belonged to Blackwood, the other to a visitor. "The investments are substantial, William, but the returns could transform your operation," the visitor was saying. "Steam-powered gins are the future. You could double your output." "Anderson's plantation tried steam power last year," Blackwood replied. "The boiler exploded, killed 2 white mechanics and a dozen slaves. Bad for business, bad for morale." "That was poor engineering. These new English models are far superior." Isaiah slowed his work, listening intently. "Perhaps," Blackwood conceded, "but who would maintain it? Pennington barely understands the mechanical gin. That's why I've brought engineering plans. Hire a proper white mechanic from Charleston." There was a pause. "Actually, I may have another option. The slave I purchased last quarter, the one-handed man, has proven quite adept with machinery." The visitor scoffed. "A slave operating steam equipment? That's giving a loaded gun to a child. This one's different, educated somehow, though he hides it well. Knows more about mechanics than most white men I've met." Isaiah's pulse quickened. Blackwood had noticed more than he'd let on. "Well, I'll leave the plans regardless. The offer stands until month's end." The voices moved away, and Isaiah quickly finished the plumbing repair. As he gathered his tools, he noticed blueprints spread across a desk in the adjacent study. With a quick glance toward the doorway, he stepped closer. The plans showed a steam-powered cotton gin system far more advanced than anything Isaiah had seen before. His mind raced with the implications, both the danger and the opportunity such a system represented. "Find what you're looking for," came a cold voice from behind him. Isaiah turned to find Blackwood watching from the doorway. "Just finishing the repair, sir," Isaiah replied, stepping away from the desk. Blackwood entered, closing the door behind him. "Do you understand these?" he asked, gesturing to the blueprints. Isaiah hesitated. Admitting too much knowledge could be dangerous, but lying might cost him this rare opportunity. "Some of it, sir. I've seen steam engines before." Blackwood studied him with calculating eyes. Where did a slave learn to read engineering drawings? Isaiah kept his face carefully neutral. My first master's son was studying engineering. I would clean his study while he worked. I watched. It wasn't entirely a lie. What Isaiah omitted was how the young master had secretly taught him to read and understand the drawings out of fascination with Isaiah's natural mechanical aptitude. "And you remembered everything you saw?" Blackwood asked skeptically. "Not everything, sir, but enough to recognize the designs." Blackwood was silent for a long moment, his eyes never leaving Isaiah's face. "These plans represent an investment of $5,000. Properly implemented, they could increase my output by 40%. Improperly handled, they could reduce my house to splinters and kill everyone inside." He picked up one of the drawings. "Tell me what this component does." Isaiah recognized it immediately, a safety pressure release valve, but measured his response carefully. "It prevents the boiler from building up too much steam pressure, sir. Without it, or if it's improperly calibrated, the boiler could explode." Something flickered across Blackwood's face, satisfaction perhaps, or confirmation of a suspicion. "I'm considering this investment," he said finally. "If I proceed, you would be responsible for its installation and maintenance, under Pennington's supervision, of course." "Yes, sir," Isaiah replied, keeping his voice steady despite the surge of possibilities this presented. "Make no mistake," Blackwood continued, his voice hardening. "You would be watched at all times. Any sabotage, any misguided ideas about using this machinery for leverage would result in consequences worse than death." "I understand, sir. Do you?" Blackwood stepped closer. "Because I think you understand far more than you let on, Isaiah. I think behind that deferential mask is a calculating mind. That makes you valuable, but it also makes you dangerous." Isaiah remained silent, knowing any response would only confirm Blackwood's suspicions. "You may go," Blackwood said finally. "Holt will escort you back." That night, as Isaiah lay on his pallet in the gin house storage room, his mind raced with the day's developments. Blackwood had seen through him, at least partially. That made his position more precarious, but it also created new possibilities. Steam power. The very thought sent a thrill of both fear and anticipation through him. Such a system would be complex, requiring specialized knowledge to operate safely. Knowledge that Blackwood and Pennington lacked, but Isaiah possessed. He thought of Sarah and her son, of the old man with the scarred back, of all the others toiling in the fields. If he gained enough trust and responsibility through this new system, could he leverage it somehow? Not just for his own benefit, but for others. It was a dangerous line of thinking. Slaves who showed ambition or too much intelligence were often broken or sold. But as Isaiah stared into the darkness, he realized that something had shifted inside him. For years, he had focused solely on survival. Now, for the first time since losing his hand, he dared to think about something more. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. A summer storm was approaching, and Isaiah could smell rain on the breeze coming through his small window. He closed his eyes and began to formulate a plan, one that would require patience, calculation, and perfect timing. The steam-powered gin arrived in 6 massive crates during the first week of September. Isaiah watched from the shadows as a team of oxen dragged the heavy containers up the hill to the gin house. Blackwood stood nearby, supervising the delivery while engaged in conversation with a well-dressed gentleman, the engineer from the manufacturing company who would oversee the initial installation. For 2 weeks, Isaiah worked alongside the engineer, a Scotsman named McAllister, who treated him with professional detachment rather than the contempt he was accustomed to from white men. Under McAllister's guidance, Isaiah absorbed every detail of the complex system, the boiler mechanics, pressure gauges, safety valves, and the intricate network of pipes and conduits that would harness steam power to drive the gin at unprecedented speeds. Pennington hovered anxiously throughout the process, clearly intimidated by the complex machinery and increasingly resentful of Isaiah's growing expertise. Blackwood, however, seemed pleased with the arrangement, often observing the installation progress with keen interest. "The slave understands the system better than your overseer," McAllister remarked to Blackwood during a demonstration of the pressure relief mechanisms. "He has a natural aptitude for engineering." Blackwood's expression remained impassive. "Just ensure that everything is documented clearly. I won't have my investment dependent on a slave's knowledge alone." McAllister glanced at Isaiah, who pretended not to hear as he adjusted a fitting on the main steam line. "Of course, though I should note that proper maintenance will require someone with significant mechanical understanding." On the final day of installation, McAllister took Isaiah aside while Blackwood was engaged with Pennington across the gin house. "You're more educated than you let on," the Scotsman said quietly, his eyes searching Isaiah's face. "Where did you learn?" Isaiah tensed, measuring his response carefully. "Observation, sir." McAllister shook his head slightly. "No man learns to understand pressure differentials and mechanical timing by observation alone. Someone taught you." When Isaiah remained silent, McAllister sighed. "I'm not your enemy, but I won't be your advocate either. I'm simply here to do a job." He handed Isaiah a small leather-bound notebook. "These are additional notes on maintenance and troubleshooting. Mr. Blackwood believes I've given him the only copy." Isaiah stared at the notebook, understanding the risk McAllister was taking. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely audible. McAllister glanced toward Blackwood, then back to Isaiah. "I've worked with machinery all my life. I recognize skill when I see it, regardless of who possesses it." He paused. "Just don't get yourself killed. Steam doesn't care about the color of the man operating it. It will scald white or black flesh with equal ferocity, if mishandled." Isaiah slipped the notebook into his shirt. "Thank you." With a curt nod, McAllister returned to Blackwood, announcing that the installation was complete and the system ready for operation. The transformation was immediate and dramatic. The steam-powered gin processed cotton with astonishing efficiency, requiring fewer workers to produce significantly more output. Blackwood was visibly pleased, making more frequent appearances at the gin house to observe the operation and calculate his increased profits. For Isaiah, the new system brought both opportunity and heightened scrutiny. Pennington watched him constantly, resentful of being dependent on a slave's expertise. Holt made surprise inspections, often appearing at odd hours to ensure Isaiah wasn't tampering with the machinery. Despite these challenges, Isaiah's position on the plantation had undergone a subtle but significant change. The value of his knowledge had earned him small privileges: better food, occasional permission to move about the plantation for maintenance tasks, and most importantly, access to tools and materials. In the rare moments he was truly alone, Isaiah studied McAllister's notebook, committing every detail to memory before hiding it beneath a loose floorboard in his small room. The notebook contained not just maintenance instructions, but detailed explanations of the principles behind steam power, knowledge that was typically forbidden to slaves. October arrived with an early cold snap. The plantation hummed with activity as the harvest season reached its peak. Field hands worked from dawn until well past dusk, their fingers bleeding from the sharp cotton bowls. The gin operated nearly around the clock, processing the incoming harvest at unprecedented rates. One evening, as Isaiah was performing routine maintenance on the boiler, Sarah appeared at the gin house door, her face tight with anxiety. "Isaiah," she whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "Can I speak with you?" He quickly wiped his hands on a rag and moved toward her. "What's wrong?" "It's Thomas. He's burning with fever. The overseer won't call for a doctor. Says it's just a cold and he'll recover, or he won't." Her voice broke. "He's all I have." Isaiah felt a surge of anger that he carefully contained. "What are his symptoms?" "High fever, coughing that won't stop, and he's struggling to breathe," Sarah replied, desperation in her eyes. "Do you know anything about medicines?" Isaiah hesitated. His knowledge extended to mechanics, not medicine, but he had seen similar symptoms before. "It might be lung inflammation. There are herbs that can help bring down the fever and ease his breathing," he thought quickly. "I need access to the woods beyond the north fields." Sarah's eyes widened. "That's outside the plantation boundaries. If you're caught—" "I know," Isaiah interrupted, "but I need pine bark and wild cherry for the cough. Can you get word to old Marcus? He knows which plants heal." Sarah nodded. "He's been helping care for Thomas when I'm in the fields. Tell him what we need. I'll find a way to get there tomorrow night." Isaiah glanced toward the main house. "Go now, before you're missed." After Sarah left, Isaiah turned back to the boiler, his mind racing. Leaving the plantation boundaries without permission was punishable by whipping or worse, but the image of Sarah's desperate face pushed aside his caution. Sometimes survival meant taking calculated risks. The following evening, Isaiah created a minor malfunction in the secondary drive belt, nothing that would seriously impair production, but enough to justify his presence at the gin house late into the night for repairs. Once darkness had fallen completely, he slipped out through a rarely used side door and made his way cautiously toward the north fields. The autumn night was cool and clear, with a 3/4 moon providing enough light to navigate by. Isaiah moved silently through the harvested cotton fields, staying low and using the shadows for cover. Years of caution had taught him how to move unseen when necessary. He had almost reached the tree line when a voice called out from the darkness. "Who's there?" Isaiah froze, recognizing the voice of one of the night watchmen, slaves trusted enough to patrol the grounds after dark in exchange for slightly better conditions. "Solomon," Isaiah replied quietly, using the man's name to establish trust. "It's Isaiah from the gin house." A tall figure emerged from the shadows, holding a lantern. Solomon's weathered face showed recognition, then suspicion. "You're far from the gin house," he observed. "Holt finds you out here. He'll have the skin off your back." Isaiah made a swift decision. "Sarah's boy is sick. I'm gathering medicine from the woods." Solomon's expression softened slightly. "Thomas, I heard he was ailing." He hesitated, conflict evident on his face. As a night watchman, he was obligated to report slaves outside their designated areas. "I can be back before anyone knows I'm gone," Isaiah pressed. "The boy might die without help." After a long moment, Solomon lowered his lantern. "I patrol this section again in 1 hour. If I find you still here..." He let the warning hang unfinished. "Thank you," Isaiah said, relief washing through him. Solomon turned away. "I never saw you. And Isaiah, watch for the new hunting traps by the creek. Master Blackwood had them set yesterday." With a grateful nod, Isaiah slipped past him into the woods. Moving quickly but carefully, he gathered the pine bark and wild cherries Sarah had requested, along with several other medicinal plants he recognized from his childhood when an old woman on his first plantation had taught him basic herbal remedies. As he knelt by a stream to wash the plant roots, a sound caught his attention. Voices approaching from the direction of the road that bordered Blackwood's property. Isaiah extinguished his small candle and pressed himself against a large oak tree, listening intently. "Moving them through tomorrow night," a man's voice was saying. 3 from the Jenkins place, possibly more. "Risky with the increased patrols," another voice responded. "Can't be helped. There's word of a sale coming. It's now or never for them." Isaiah barely breathed, recognizing what he was overhearing. The Underground Railroad, the secret network helping enslaved people escape to freedom in the North. The safe house in Columbia can hold them for 2 days, no more, the first voice continued. After that, they'll move north through the mountain route. And the contact here? Old woman who sells herbs in the Charleston market. Uses the name Mama Esther. She'll recognize the phrase, "Winter comes early this year." The voices grew fainter as the men moved away down the road. Isaiah remained frozen in place, his mind racing with the dangerous knowledge he'd just acquired. The Underground Railroad had a presence near Magnolia Hill, and now he knew how to make contact. It was information that could get him killed if discovered. Yet it represented something he had barely dared to contemplate, a tangible path to freedom. With the medicinal plants secured, Isaiah made his way back to the plantation, slipping past the slave quarters to deliver the herbs to Sarah before returning to the gin house. As he worked through the night to complete the repairs he'd used as his cover, a new plan began forming in his mind, one far more ambitious and perilous than anything he had considered before. The steam engine that powered the new gin was more than just a machine. With the right modifications, it could become something else entirely. The knowledge in McAllister's notebook, combined with what he'd overheard in the woods, presented a dangerous but compelling possibility. By dawn, as the first workers arrived at the gin house, Isaiah had made his decision. The path forward would require perfect timing, careful preparation, and the courage to risk everything. But for the first time since he'd arrived at Magnolia Hill, Isaiah allowed himself to imagine a future beyond its boundaries, not just for himself, but for others as well. November brought colder weather and increasing tension to Magnolia Hill. The harvest season was ending, but Blackwood pushed for maximum production, driving both the field hands and the gin house workers to exhaustion. Isaiah maintained the steam engine with meticulous care, knowing that his plan depended on the machine's perfect operation, until the moment it didn't. Thomas had recovered from his illness, thanks to the herbal remedies and Sarah's devoted care. The incident had created an unexpected bond between Isaiah and several other slaves who now looked to him with cautious respect. Among them was old Marcus, whose knowledge of herbs was matched by his understanding of the plantation's routines and vulnerabilities. Master Blackwood's hosting a grand harvest celebration 2 weeks from Saturday, Marcus informed Isaiah as they worked together to repair a broken wheelbarrow behind the tool shed. Every planter family within 20 miles will be here. Extra food being prepared, musicians hired from Charleston. Isaiah nodded, absorbing this information while appearing to focus on the wheelbarrow. How many house slaves will be serving? All of them, plus some pulled from the fields for the night, Marcus replied. Overseers will be busy managing the extra workers, keeping everything running smooth for the white folks. The older man's eyes held a question he didn't voice aloud. At 63, Marcus had spent his entire life in bondage, watching children and grandchildren sold away. He had survived by being invisible, competent enough to avoid punishment, but never demonstrating abilities that might threaten the established order. Yet here he was, deliberately sharing information that could only be useful for one purpose. Isaiah met his gaze steadily. "You ever think about the North, Marcus?" A loaded question. Dangerous to ask, more dangerous to answer honestly. Marcus glanced around before responding quietly. Thought about it every day for 60 years. Never saw a way that didn't end with bloodhounds and a noose. "What if there was a way?" Isaiah asked, his voice barely audible. A distraction big enough that they wouldn't know who was missing until it was too late. Marcus studied him for a long moment. "You playing with fire, young man?" "I'm good with fire," Isaiah replied, thinking of the steam boiler and its carefully controlled power. "And pressure." After a thoughtful silence, Marcus nodded almost imperceptibly. Sarah and Thomas would need help. Few others might too. Some are too scared, some can't make the journey. How many? 7, maybe 8 who'd risk it if there was a real chance, Marcus said. Counting you, Sarah, and the boy. It was more than Isaiah had anticipated, which would complicate the logistics, but the core plan remained viable. 2 weeks from Saturday, he murmured. We need to be ready. Over the following days, Isaiah made careful preparations while maintaining his normal routine. Using his limited privileges to move around the plantation for maintenance tasks, he cached small bundles of supplies at strategic locations, food stolen in tiny amounts from the kitchen stores, a spare blanket from the laundry, a compass quietly removed from Pennington's desk. Most importantly, he made subtle modifications to the steam engine, adjustments so minor that even another engineer might not notice them. He altered the safety release valve. Not enough to create immediate danger, but sufficient to allow him to trigger a controlled malfunction when the time came. 1 week before the planned escape, disaster nearly struck. Pennington, increasingly suspicious of Isaiah's movements around the plantation, conducted a surprise inspection of the gin house storage room where Isaiah slept. As Isaiah stood silently by the door, the overseer methodically searched through his few possessions. "What's this?" Pennington demanded, pulling McAllister's notebook from beneath the loose floorboard. Isaiah's blood ran cold, but he kept his expression neutral. "Maintenance records for the steam engine, sir. Mr. McAllister said to keep detailed notes." Pennington flipped through the pages, his brow furrowing at the technical diagrams and notations. "This looks like more than maintenance records." "The Scotsman was very thorough, sir," Isaiah replied, keeping his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Said proper documentation was essential for safe operation." Pennington continued examining the notebook with narrowed eyes. His limited understanding of engineering was Isaiah's only hope. The overseer wouldn't want to admit he couldn't comprehend the technical content. After an agonizing minute, Pennington slapped the notebook shut. "Master Blackwood should see this. I don't like you having information the rest of us don't understand." Before Isaiah could respond, the alarm bell rang from the direction of the fields, the signal for fire or other emergency. Pennington cursed, tucking the notebook into his jacket. "Stay here," he ordered, locking the storage room door as he hurried out. Isaiah moved immediately to the small window, straining to see what was happening. Smoke rose from one of the cotton storage sheds near the fields. Workers rushed with buckets of water, while overseers shouted orders. In the confusion, he spotted Sarah moving purposefully away from the fire rather than toward it. A diversion. Someone had created a distraction at the perfect moment. Isaiah worked quickly, using a concealed tool to manipulate the door lock. Years of mechanical work had given him intimate knowledge of how such mechanisms functioned. Within minutes, he was free and moving silently through the gin house toward Pennington's office. The notebook contained too much incriminating evidence. Diagrams Isaiah had added, notes on pressure points and fail-safes for the steam system that were crucial to his escape plan. He had to recover it before Pennington delivered it to Blackwood. The office door was unlocked, the room empty in the rush to address the fire. Isaiah spotted the notebook on Pennington's desk and quickly retrieved it, then searched for anything else that might be useful. In a drawer, he found a small pistol and a pouch of ammunition, a potentially valuable resource, though using it would be a last resort. After a moment's hesitation, Isaiah took only the notebook, leaving the weapon behind. The punishment for a slave possessing firearms was immediate execution. The notebook was risk enough. He had just returned to his locked room, notebook safely hidden again, when Holt appeared at the door. "Fires contained," the overseer announced gruffly. "Pennington wants you to check if any ash got into the gin machinery." Isaiah nodded obediently, his pulse still racing from the narrow escape. As he followed Holt to the main gin house floor, he caught sight of Sarah working with other women to clean up water damage from the firefighting efforts. Her eyes met his briefly, a silent question in them. With the slightest nod, Isaiah confirmed that the plan remained in motion. The night of Blackwood's harvest celebration arrived with clear skies and a biting chill in the air. The main house blazed with light, carriages lined the circular driveway, and the sounds of an orchestra drifted across the plantation grounds. As Isaiah had anticipated, the overseers were focused on ensuring the evening proceeded flawlessly, their attention divided between managing the extra house servants and maintaining security around the property. Isaiah worked later than usual at the gin house, carefully making his final preparations. The steam system had been shut down for the night, but he had ensured the boiler retained enough pressure for his purposes. The modifications he'd made over the past 2 weeks would allow him to create a controlled release of steam, dramatic enough to cause alarm and confusion, but not so catastrophic as to cause deadly harm. At 10 o'clock, he slipped out of the gin house and made his way to the predetermined meeting point behind the old tobacco drying shed. One by one, the others joined him, Sarah clutching Thomas tightly to her chest, old Marcus moving with surprising agility despite his years, and 5 others who had decided to risk the journey to freedom. "Everyone clear on the plan?" Isaiah asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Nods all around. They had rehearsed this in fragments over the past 2 weeks, never all together until this moment. "Once it starts, we move fast and quiet. Stay together. Follow the creek north for 3 miles, then east at the lightning-struck oak. The contact will meet us near the crossroads." Isaiah looked each person in the eye. "If anyone gets caught, you never saw the rest of us. You were alone and confused because of the commotion. Understand?" More nods, faces tense with fear and determination. Isaiah checked the position of the moon, nearly midnight. 20 minutes. Be ready to move the instant you hear it. He made his way back to the gin house, moving silently through the shadows. The celebration at the main house was reaching its peak, laughter and music floating through the night air. Most of the slave quarters were dark, their occupants either sleeping or serving at the main house. Inside the gin house, Isaiah moved directly to the steam engine. Using his specialized knowledge, he adjusted several key components, not to create a genuine explosion, which would risk lives, but to orchestrate a controlled failure that would create tremendous noise and release clouds of steam while causing minimal actual damage. After making the final adjustments, Isaiah positioned himself near the exit and took a deep breath. The moment of commitment had arrived. Once he triggered the malfunction, there would be no turning back. Success would mean freedom, failure would mean death. With steady hands, he opened the primary pressure valve while simultaneously blocking the secondary release system. The effect was immediate and dramatic. A deafening hiss filled the gin house as pressurized steam escaped through channels never intended for such volume. The noise quickly built to a thunderous roar. Isaiah counted silently to 10, then triggered the second phase of his plan. The pressure forced a weak joint he had deliberately compromised, creating a spectacular release of steam and a sound like a cannon blast. The gin house shook with the force of it, windows shattering outward. As planned, nothing was actually exploding. The steam engine was essentially destroying itself in a controlled manner, producing maximum chaos with minimum danger. But to anyone witnessing from outside, it would appear as if the gin house was being torn apart by a catastrophic boiler explosion. Isaiah slipped out the side door, just as shouts of alarm erupted from the direction of the main house. Lanterns appeared in the darkness as overseers and house slaves rushed toward the gin house. In the confusion, no one noticed a solitary figure moving in the opposite direction. At the tobacco shed, the others were waiting, wide-eyed with fear and excitement. Now, Isaiah said simply, leading them toward the north fence line where he had earlier created a gap disguised by carefully positioned branches. They moved as one unit through the opening and into the woods beyond, Sarah carrying Thomas, old Marcus supported by a younger man when the uneven ground proved challenging. No one spoke as they followed the creek northward, each step taking them further from bondage and closer to an uncertain future. Behind them, Magnolia Hill was in chaos. The night sky glowed orange from the gin house fire, and the sound of shouting carried through the forest. But there was no alarm bell yet, no indication that anyone had realized some slaves were missing, rather than simply displaced by the emergency. After an hour of steady travel, they reached the lightning-struck oak tree Isaiah had described. Here they turned eastward as planned, moving away from the creek toward the crossroads where their contact from the Underground Railroad would supposedly be waiting. "What if they're not there?" Sarah whispered, adjusting Thomas's weight in her arms. "Then we keep moving north," Isaiah replied with more confidence than he felt. "We don't stop until we reach free soil." Old Marcus, who had been silent throughout the journey, suddenly raised his hand for the group to halt. "Listen," he whispered. In the distance, barely audible, came the baying of hounds. "They've discovered we're gone," one of the younger men said, panic rising in his voice. Isaiah had anticipated this possibility, though he'd hoped for more time. "We need to split up," he decided quickly. "They'll expect us to stay together. Marcus, you know these woods. Can you lead half the group to the East Road?" Marcus nodded. "Used to hunt these forests as a boy. I know every trail." "Good. Sarah, Thomas, and I will continue to the crossroads with the others. We'll meet at the safe house in Columbia." Isaiah turned to a young woman named Esther, who had joined their group. "You have the message memorized." "Winter comes early this year," she confirmed. With quick, whispered goodbyes, the group divided. Isaiah led his smaller party forward, moving as quickly as possible while helping Sarah with Thomas. The sounds of pursuit grew no louder, suggesting the hounds had not yet picked up their trail. The creek water had temporarily obscured their scent, as Isaiah had hoped. After another tense hour of travel, they reached the crossroads, a simple intersection of two dirt roads, deserted in the pre-dawn darkness. Isaiah signaled for the others to remain hidden in the trees, while he moved forward alone to scout. The crossroads appeared empty, with no sign of the contact Marcus had told him to expect. Isaiah felt a surge of desperation. Had they misunderstood the directions? Had the Underground Railroad operatives abandoned them? Just as he was about to return to the others, a covered wagon appeared on the eastern road, moving slowly in the darkness without lanterns. Isaiah tensed, ready to retreat if necessary. The wagon stopped at the crossroads. After a moment, a figure climbed down from the driver's seat, a white man in plain farmer's clothing. "Winter comes early this year," Isaiah called softly from the edge of the trees. The man turned toward his voice. "But spring always follows," came the reply. The countersign Isaiah had been told to expect. Relief flooded through him. "We have 5, 3 adults, 1 child, plus myself." The man nodded. "Where are the others?" Marcus mentioned. "Taking an alternate route. They'll meet us at the Columbia safe house." "Quickly then," the man said, gesturing toward the wagon. "We need to be off this road before daylight." Isaiah signaled to the others, who emerged cautiously from the trees. As they approached the wagon, Isaiah noticed something about the farmer, a distinctive callus pattern on his hands that only came from one profession. "You're an engineer," Isaiah observed quietly, as the others climbed into the hidden compartment beneath the wagon's false floor. The man glanced at him with surprise. "Machinist by trade, railroad engineer by calling." He studied Isaiah's face. "And you?" "Something similar," Isaiah replied, extending his right hand, while his left arm's stump remained partially hidden by his sleeve. The man shook it without hesitation. James Wilson, he introduced himself. Isaiah Freeman, Isaiah responded, using his chosen surname for the first time, no longer property, but a man claiming his identity. As dawn broke over the horizon, the wagon moved northward on little-used back roads, carrying its precious cargo toward the first stop on their journey to freedom. Isaiah sat beside Wilson on the driver's bench, his eyes scanning continuously for signs of pursuit. "The Columbia safe house is secure," Wilson informed him quietly. "You'll stay there for 3 days while we arrange the next leg of your journey. Eventually, you'll reach Philadelphia." Philadelphia. The word itself sounded like freedom. Isaiah had heard stories of the city where black people could walk the streets without slave patrols, where some even owned businesses and property. "What happens then?" Isaiah asked. Wilson glanced at him. "That depends on you. Some continue to Canada to be truly beyond the reach of the fugitive slave law. Others remain, building new lives, sometimes helping others make the same journey." Isaiah thought of the knowledge he carried, engineering skills that had value regardless of the color of his hands. In the north, perhaps that knowledge could serve a different purpose than it had on Magnolia Hill. "I have skills," he said simply, "and I understand how pressure works, when to contain it, when to release it, and how to channel it toward a purpose." Wilson nodded with understanding. The railroad always needs people who understand such principles. As the wagon continued northward, Isaiah found his thoughts returning to Magnolia Hill. By now, Blackwood would know exactly who had orchestrated the escape and how. The steam engine, symbol of the plantation owner's pride and power, had become the instrument of his slaves' liberation. In the wagon bed behind him, Sarah was softly singing to Thomas, a freedom song disguised as a spiritual. The others listened silently, their faces reflecting a complex mixture of fear, hope, and disbelief that they were actually moving toward freedom. Isaiah looked down at his hand and the stump of his left arm. For years, his deficiency had defined him in the eyes of others, marking him as damaged property. Yet that same perceived weakness had placed him in the gin house, given him access to the knowledge and tools that ultimately opened the path to freedom. The winter sun rose higher, illuminating a landscape that looked no different than the one they had left behind. Yet everything had changed. Every mile northward was a mile toward a future where Isaiah and the others might finally belong to themselves. The pressure had been building for generations. In every lash of the whip, every family torn apart, every human being treated as property. Now, for these 8 souls at least, that pressure had found release, propelling them toward a new horizon of possibility. The wagon rolled on, and Isaiah Freeman faced forward, his eyes fixed on the road ahead.